Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
Carrie Clack, columnist, editorial board.
Nancy Prayer-Johnson, associate editorial board editor.
Metro editor Greg Jefferson.
And this is our first podcast of 2023. Happy New Year to everybody. I don't think it's too late. When is there like a cutoff point when it's too late to wish people Happy New Year?
You've got another week.
I got another
more week.
After King Day.
I was going to say like,
okay,
that's good. I was going to say Valentine's Day. I don't really know. I'm not sure. But early January in an odd-numbered year means a lot of things. It means the beginning of a legislative session in Texas. It means kind of the beginning of city council races in San Antonio. Along those lines, I think a couple of council members that we know are going to face opposition are District 10 Councilman Clayton Perry if he chooses to run again. And since we did our last podcast, we've learned a little bit more about the hit and run accident that he's facing charges over. We learned he had 14 drinks in the hours leading up to that. District 1 Councilman Mario Bravo is going to face competition for a couple of reasons. There was the infamous encounter he had with Ana Sandoval before a council meeting in September where he verbally berated her. There's also a project that really predates his time on the council, but he's taken a lot of criticism for because you have businesses understandably frustrated about the construction work that's happened on the St. Mary's Strip and how slow it's gone and how businesses have been affected by it. And I think that there's been a feeling among some business people that he hadn't been responsive enough to that. Something to look for is the council is in the coming week they're going to be discussing a proposed $2.25 million allocation in American Rescue Plan Act funds to kind of help some of the businesses in that area, which I think will, I think it's going to be interesting to see how businesses respond. I mean, I'm sure they're going to welcome it. I mean, whether it would be anything close to enough is going to be another question, but that's going to be something to look for. Another thing that happens in early January in odd-numbered years is we have a new Congress and we have a new Speaker of the House. I was not sure a few days ago if we were going to have a new U.S. Speaker of the House by the time we did today's podcast, but after 4 days and 15 ballots, California Republican Kevin McCarthy is the new U.S. Speaker of the House, and he had to give away a lot. And we're going to talk about that. To get the speakership, it was quite an ordeal. Carrie, I know you were following this. It was one of those things that you weren't sure you wanted to keep watching, but you couldn't stop watching. What were your thoughts on it?
I started to go to bed right after the 14th vote.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you see McCarthy and Matt Gaetz running toward it has to be the single most humiliating, self-emasculating act of any national politician. Usually in sports or any job performance, when you say to somebody that he gave all that he had. That's meant admiringly. With McCarthy's, he gave all that he had. I mean, he tried to sell his soul to the devil, but there was nothing left. But it was just, it's just. And we were having fun with it, and it was kind of enjoyable. This is something that he's wanted all of his life, and it was made so difficult for him to get. But there's going to be now some serious policy consequences that comes from all of his deal making. Absolutely,
and we're going to talk a little bit about how this is going to affect the governing process for the House and the policy consequences for it. The thing about this, Greg, that struck me is like it would be a really hard thing to explain the nuances of this battle, internal battle in the Republican Party to somebody who has not been following U.S. or is not from this country or hasn't been following it politics here closely, because part of it is you would say, well, the Trumpy extremists were, but Donald Trump endorsed Kevin McCarthy. With the exception of a short period there after the January 6th insurrection when Kevin McCarthy briefly criticized Trump and then walked it back and then went and kissed the ring at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, he is kissed up to Trump relentlessly. And so Trump factored in there, but it's hard to explain what the battle is.
Well, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. So Trump set in motion this political chaos, right? And it's gotten beyond him. So that, I mean, it has clearly. I mean, you've got 20 lawmakers who held Congress hostage for 4 days. And he, a lot of that goes back to Trump. I mean, I think, to say that Trump created Trumpism, I think I've always felt that's wrong. Like he was, the extreme partisanship was in Congress was in place way before Trump came along, but he exploited that and he made it his own. And he developed an army of acolytes and base supporters, and now he can no longer control them. I think that's what we saw last week. And it's chaos. I mean, it's like when you've got a single lawmaker who can call a snap vote on the speaker. Good luck with that.
I kept tuning in and out as well. I'm sure like all of us, I couldn't watch it constantly, but in and out, I'd get notifications and start watching it. I was happening, to watch it when they finally, came to that conclusion. But the part when Matt Gaetz nominated Trump, I was just, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised by it.
Right.
But I think I tweeted like, this is insane, you guys. This is insane. It was like a C-SPAN thing I was watching on my phone. And of course, I don't think he got any other votes.
That was
nobody else voted.
Right.
But it gave me some hope though, that if he couldn't, hopefully there will be no future with Trump. And that gave me some hope. That was the only positive thing, I think.
Right. Yeah. And the interesting thing about that was that had been kind of in the background on, Fox News and kind of the right-wing media for over a month. And it never got traction. Never. And I think that's pretty instructive.
Actually, more than a month.
Yes.
I mean, something that's always been just simmering in the background that they could elect Trump as Speaker of the House.
Yeah. I think we're coming into a period where you've got Trumpism because we've got nothing else to call it yet.
Yeah.
Because Gatesism sounds weird.
Yeah.
I mean, but without Trump.
Boberism.
That kind of sucks.
Yeah,
right? It's not great. But yeah, I mean, we're going into this period of political extremism without Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be. I'm really curious about what's going to happen with Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, once he gets into the Republican primary. I mean, I just want to see how this plays out. But I get the feeling this is probably not going to be a walk for Donald Trump. I could be, a year from now, I could be totally. I hope somebody forgets that.
His influence definitely seems to have diminished. I think this, even though McCarthy credited him with helping him get over the top, I mean, it really felt to me like he was kind of a bystander when it came to this. The as far as the things that McCarthy gave up, and Greg mentioned one of them, which is like the motion to vacate. So one person, it could be one Republican, and we know there's plenty more than one who at any time could do this, could just take a complain and get a vote on the House floor to basically a no confidence vote and have him removed at any time. He also, and I think this was clearly him pandering to Trump and to the people who sort of cling to the idea that Trump has been persecuted, which was this subcommittee, which is going to be under the Judiciary Committee, which will be run by Jim Jordan. And it's a subcommittee to investigate what is described as the weaponization of the federal government. Because there's the perception among Republicans that the FBI and the Justice Department and the executive branch has really been used to just attack Donald Trump. And so there's going to be an investigation into that. I think the thing that concerns the most people is the fact that there will no longer be allowed, if the rules that they're going to vote on, they're going to vote on them Monday night tonight. The rules include a provision that says that you cannot raise the debt ceiling unless there is some offsetting action, unless there are budget cuts. What's interesting to me is that San Antonio Congressman Tony Gonzalez has come out and said he was an ardent Kevin McCarthy supporter, but he has said he's going to vote against the rules package. And one of the main reasons is that he's concerned that there'll be cuts in defense spending that will be forced when we have an increase in the debt ceiling. And I think for a lot of other people, there are just concerns about what's going to happen to social programs. We saw this during the Tea Party, the early years of the Tea Party movement, when John Boehner was Speaker, that there were efforts to try to cut into longstanding programs that would really affect a lot of people. And I mean, when you look at this rules package. And it's going to be fascinating to see whether it passes or not. And a lot of people who are listening will know by the time they hear this whether it passed or not. What concerns you the most about it?
Plus, because I'm often a critic of him, but kudos to Congressman Gonzalez for taking the stand. Well, all of it is bad. The thing about refusing to raise the debt ceiling, that's always been a political game that both parties play because. Despite every now and then a shutdown or something, it's going to get raised. When Obama was in the Senate, Obama voted against it because he knew it was going to pass. So it's always a game. But now you have this reality where it could truly happen, and which is reflective of these 20 legislators who have held us hostage and continue to hold us hostage. Is that they're not thinking, they don't frankly care about the consequences of policy, about what happens when you can't fund the military, what happens when you can't fund anything, and what happens if you have that one person who McCarthy pisses off, and here we go again with.
I think the first thing on the chopping block is going to be the IRS funding, that additional funding is the first thing that's going to go. And I just wonder, are they going to be able to do their very basic job? We need to collect taxes, but obviously they needed that funding, and now it's probably, I don't think it's going to happen now. And
it's on the TV show, Do Texas Talk, I had Tony Gonzalez on in December, and he did support cutting funding for the IRS. And, and my argument is just that, and I know that it's always, the IRS has always been unpopular, will always be unpopular, and you're not going to get a lot of public support for the idea of hiring more people at the IRS. It's just never going to be a political winner for you. Yeah. But my thinking is, if you're somebody who plays by the rules and you pay your taxes, why would you want the IRS to be stifled in its ability to enforce tax laws and make sure that other people are
and let's also dispel the myth that it's 87,000 new IRS agents.
That's a great point.
That's not what it is. This is people who are going to be retiring. They're not all agents.
That's right.
This is over a course of a decade.
A lot of it is just providing services to people who are like you, who have questions. Just people in the country who have questions and need help.
Yeah.
I know. I know my own son, like during the whole COVID thing, quarantine time and stuff, he was calling IRS and needed some help. And, he's young, early 20s. And so he's calling and nobody would call him back. He would leave messages. He would email. It was just like, and he couldn't do his taxes. And it was really a scary thing. And I'm just kind of thinking about that going forward. There's nobody on that other line to help you when you have these problems that sometimes can arise. And what's going to happen?
It just comes down to a damaged IRS benefits only the wealthy. You're always going to pay your taxes.
Yes.
Look, you are going to be on the hook for your taxes. And it's those who look for a lot of loopholes, who look for tax shelters. They'll benefit because they'll be facing a decimated army of IRS agents who will be unable to find a lot of this stuff. So this is to me it's a very class driven thing.
That's right. Yeah. One thing I wanted to talk about is another congressman who represents part of San Antonio is Chip Roy. I've been really critical of him during his time in Congress. I think he's said and done a lot of homophobic things. I think he has encouraged sort of the fear of the COVID vaccine, although he tends to say it's he supports just the freedom for people to choose. He's actually supported a lot of and amplified a lot of anti-vax theories. He was a really key player in this because he was one of the 20 who opposed McCarthy. It seemed to me, though, and I'll give him credit on this, I didn't feel that it was, with Matt Gaetz, it felt almost like I just want to get attention for myself, or it was some kind of personal thing. I think Chip Roy, one thing is he's pretty consistent about certain things and about process. And I think he I think he has a point to some degree about, because one of the things he's complained about a lot is, these omnibus spending bills go before members of Congress. Nobody gets to see them till a few hours before. Nobody knows what's in them. And one of if you look at the rules package that McCarthy agreed to, I mean, there are a couple of things here that seem very much like Chip Roy items. One is that you're going to, instead of having these big omnibus spending bills, you're going to try to break things up into individual items. You're going to have, I think, 72 hours, give members of Congress 72 hours before they vote on things. I do think that there's some validity to the idea. There's no question that the way the process plays out, a lot of things get done at the last minute. Of course, the rules package, that was they were talking about voting on that on Friday night, they were going to just okay, he's the speaker, we're going to vote on that, whether you had time to think about that. So they were there was something contradictory about that. But I do think that he's got a point there. But it's been taken now, I think, to a degree where, when you talk about something like the debt ceiling, this is money that Congress has allocated.
Yeah.
And it's really just saying, it's are we going to default on debt?
I'm not paying my credit card.
Yeah, that's what it is. And it seems like a really backward way of dealing with governance and appropriations and all that kind of stuff. Wanted to shift to the issue of the border. We had Republicans for 2 years calling on Joe Biden to come visit the border. On Sunday, he did, and Republicans are angry that he visited the border because they didn't happen soon enough. This came 3 days after he proposed some new policies, which Republicans are saying it's not enough. Democrats are saying many Democrats are upset about these policies. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk with you, Carrie and Nancy. You all got to actually visit the border. Was it about 4 weeks ago?
A couple of weeks before Christmas.
Yeah.
And you went to Eagle Pass, right? Mm-hmm. What was your takeaway there? Because we hear so many conflicting accounts of what's going on and what the problems are. What did you get?
This was, I guess, when we went. It was supposed to be the very next week that Title 42 would have been lifted. Is what everybody was expecting, and we've had some possibilities of that happening, and then it's caught in the courts. And so when we were there, we got a tour. The Border Patrol went and and they met with us, and they explained what's happening there on the ground and just how overwhelmed they are. I think I personally came away feeling that they needed more funding for just more funding to be able to deal with this. They also need a better way to enforce the border policies that are there, but a way to beef it up. I think that, as we all know, it's broken. It's a broken system, but it's been broken for a really long time. So yeah, there's some big problems there. We came away, I came away just feeling like, wow, if this just really nervous for them, for, the Border Patrol that took this time to explain where things are. We stood out there with them, looking out at, there was trash strewn all over the place and clothing items, medicine and different things that people leave right there on the border. So we got an up close look as well. We saw the, I guess you'd call it a shelter that was there, like where they're processed, not a shelter, but it's where they're processed in. And we got to see the whole thing. Yeah, the processing center. And just, we got a really up close look at all of that and just came away thinking, wow, if this is lifted, there's no way they're going to be able to hold, it's going to be chaotic. Yeah. You're talking about Title 42?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's the thing about it. And the Biden administration has had such a schizophrenic sort of approach or stance on this because this was something that Donald Trump put in place during the early days of COVID, using a public health policy as a way to just turn people away, asylum seekers. And Joe Biden denounced it. Then he ended up using it for a while. They decided not to use it, and he's fought a legal battle. And we can talk a little bit in a minute about these new policy proposals from him, but he's basically going to be using Title 42, at least in the short term. And it's so complicated because I think most people can look and say using a public health policy to deal with immigration really is there's something fundamentally wrong about that. Right. But then there's also the practical issue of just so many people coming to the border and communities unable to cope with it and officials scrambling to find ways to deal with that.
Morality versus practicality. I mean, morally, it is wrong to use a public health policy to keep people out of the country.
Yes.
But practically, there's a reason why it's easy to suspect that the Biden administration does not mind these decisions, which is keeping it in place. Right. Because again, nobody has a solution. Yeah. Nobody has a plan. And what Nancy said about the visit, the Border Patrol, they must be commended with how humanely they treat these migrants coming across. And I wish that everyone could have heard, like the commander who gave us like a 90-minute debriefing before the tour, because it would puncture a lot of talking points from both sides, and to hear him speak with a sense of compassion, but also reality, and not give in to just what the talking points on both sides, and actually share some insight about the problem that goes beyond myths and stereotypes. And Nancy talked about the items coming, at the crossing points. It's in all the years I've heard and read and seen stuff dealing with immigration. That was what stunned me the most, was just all these stuff, acres of clothes and medication and papers. And our colleague Brandon Lingo did a column about it. But that's where whatever you feel about this issue, just the fact that people are really having to discard all of this to get across, and it's just stunning.
Yeah. Greg, what did you I think Carrie made an interesting point about how the Biden administration probably they know that Title 42 is unpopular with the base, but at the same time, it is probably help deal with the volume of people coming. You said that there's maybe
exactly. You've got their left flank, the administration's left flank, calling for the end of Title 42. Just get rid of it. It's anathema. It's I mean, among other things, Trump did it. So,
right.
There you go. I mean, like the morality aside, I mean that's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
And you've got this very practical issue. I mean, you've got in the run up to you'll remember in the run up to December 19th, when we thought that Title 42 was on its way out, it would expire that day. El Paso was overrun. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of anticipation that this was about to happen, and you had like a crisis in downtown El Paso with immigrants flooding the system, and they didn't they couldn't be housed. They didn't have the housing, they didn't have the services available to handle all of them, and that's just the reality the administration is having to deal with. So they are torn, and you kind of look for clues. How serious are they about ending Title 42? And at this kind of late hour, I still don't know.
Yeah, I think the best case scenario for them, I mean, I'm just speaking about it in the most cynical political terms, is to publicly oppose it while being legally blocked from ending it. 3 days before President Biden came to the border, came to El Paso, he delivered a speech in which he introduced some new policies. And like I said, the Republicans generally said they were probably more in line with what Republicans have been calling for, but they were still saying this isn't enough. And Democrats were I think pretty unhappy about this. One of the things that he proposed is doing something with Nicaraguans, Haitians, and Cubans, which they've been doing with Venezuelans recently, which is to really restrict the terms under which people can come if they're seeking asylum. They can't simply arrive at the border between ports of entry and claim they're seeking asylum. In those cases, they're going to be sent across to Mexico. And if they want to have their asylum claims processed from those four countries, they have to use an app in which they basically schedule an appointment to have their claim processed. They have to have a sponsor and so on. And so this is, he also is sort of, I think, expanding the use of expedited removal, which some Republicans have called for, and a lot of progressives feel this is really a denial of due process because you're taking asylum seekers and saying, just determining very quickly, like, we don't think your claim is valid, we're sending you back to your country of origin. So this is clearly, I think, an attempt by Biden to say, just to look at the number of people coming, which is overwhelming a lot of our communities. And I don't think these policies are necessarily, if you look at what he was saying during the presidential campaign, during the primaries, where he was saying to asylum seekers, we welcome you. And I guess he would say that he hasn't abandoned that thought. He's just saying that you can't just show up at the border, I think is what he's saying. You just can't show up at the border and we can't deal with that. I don't know. What did you make of his new approach to this?
Well, I think the fact that he did it 3 days before coming to the border was telling itself, and I'm at the point where I don't know what. I mean, I'm looking at our paper today. I'm looking at Governor Abbott handing Biden the letter, and it's a great photo. It's great political theater. Yeah, but that's what we're getting from both sides. And I think Biden should have come to the border before now. Yeah. There's no reason that he shouldn't have.
Right.
But I'm becoming more cynical on the issue of immigration than I am on many other issues, because I just don't see a will or a path there from either side. And there's I think one side obviously one side demagogues more than the other. But I just don't know where is the starting ground where someone like Abbott and someone like Biden are really serious about finding a solution to this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the 5 demands, well, first of all, in the letter, and I printed it out as well, and I know it was in the story, but when you look at the 5 demands that Governor Abbott is making, I mean, I don't agree with all of them, but, when he starts off saying in his letter, $20 billion too little and 2 years too late, it's hard to argue against that. Yeah. So I do agree. There's both sides have definitely there's criticism on both sides of this, but I feel like politically immigration and the border policy, it's too lucrative for politicians on both sides. They want the fight. Yeah. And this is something that they, that's popular in their elections and their political policies, and they want to be able to constantly complain about the other side and not get to any kind of real solution.
Which has bedeviled presidents for decades.
Right. Decades. It's like they're blaming each other.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. So, I mean, look back at George W. Bush's time in office. He really struggled with immigration. He started out wanting to take kind of a structured path to citizenship. He was much more progressive in a way, early, in his first term, and even talking about it as Texas governor going into the presidential election in 2000. But I mean, the right wing of the Republican Party wasn't having it, and he eventually had to come around to that, and we were left with a pretty poor immigration policy. And then under President Barack Obama, it's like, and we have like a record number of deportations, and he's like threading the needle because he's got his left wing that he's having to try to satisfy. So it's the politics of it has made it almost unmanageable for presidents. Yeah. Like presidents, they're over the administration, not the legislation.
And one of the things that has struck me in recent years is that the sort of the narrative when I was younger, and I grew up on the border, that when we talked about immigration challenges, border challenges, it was the idea of people from Mexico trying to sneak across the border and, trying to find a better life, trying to get work. whatever the situation was, and sneaking across the border. And I felt when Donald Trump in 2015 made his campaign kickoff speech and talked about the border wall and talked about, Mexico doesn't send their best, they send, rapists and criminals. So he was really dealing with an old narrative. Yeah. Not to say that there aren't people from Mexico coming and that there's some who are trying to sneak across the border and not be detected. But by that point, we'd already seen during the Obama years that the real major problem was that we were seeing asylum seekers who were dealing with all kinds of, either economic devastation or political persecution, from whether it's from the Northern Triangle countries or other places. And they were coming, so they weren't necessarily coming from Mexico, and they were making long treks. They were not trying to sneak across. Yeah. They were coming in plain sight and saying, I want to seek asylum. The border wall to me never really what does that do? How does that deal with people who show up and and they're like, I'm here. I'm not trying to hide from anybody. I need help. So that was one problem. And so in the Obama years, the Trump years, the Biden years, we're seeing just a really a problem that we never saw on this scale before that, which was people in Latin America, in Central and South America, just facing all kinds of problems in their country and seeking asylum in numbers that we've never seen before. And I think the fundamental thing has been that the Biden administration looking at the options. Are we going to do the remain in Mexico thing where people are going to have to camp out and face all kinds of dangers in Mexico for 2 years or something while they're trying to get their asylum claim processed? That was the Trump approach late in his administration. Does Biden do that? Well, I mean, that doesn't seem very humane. Do we just try to build more detention facilities? And we've seen how that goes. And so the approach has generally been to process people and let them stay in the country while they wait for that. And that has, I think, been at the core of the conflict. That Republicans see this, they call it catch and release. They say it's open borders. And they bring all these things into it, like fentanyl. Fentanyl's pouring through our borders. Well, I don't think, and it's a massive problem, but I don't think that the approach of processing people at the border and then letting them go off and stay with family members or sponsors, I don't think that's contributing to the fentanyl problem. I think that's a separate issue. Right. You can debate whether that approach to asylum seekers is good or not, and I think the Biden administration is rethinking it. But it's separate from fentanyl, but all these things get lumped in there. Mm-hmm. And it's Joe Biden he's causing the fentanyl problem and all that. So I think that's my long-winded way of saying that I agree with your point that you just look and think it's just so much rhetoric that just gets spewed out that it doesn't really seem to. And
both sides talking, and this is and they're correct when they talk about dealing with with this at the source of the problem, in the countries themselves. But but realistically, how do you go about doing that? Because this is going to get worse, and it won't just be immigrants coming from Central America. I mean, the migration problem across the world is just going to escalate. Yeah. It's going to be one of the defining problems of the mid 21st century, and it's not just us that has to deal with it; it's other nations, and none of us are prepared to deal with it. Yeah,
you're exactly right. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap things up for this week. We hope that you all have been doing well, and 2023 has been treating you well so far. And like I said, we're going to have a lot to cover in the coming weeks on city council, our municipal elections, and the state legislature. So take care, and we'll be back next week. Thank you.